So we're in Indiana.
Isn't it great?
Yeah. How's the Global Entrepreneurship Congress being for you?
It's been great, Chris. It's great to connect with people. It's a great city, great to learn about what's going on here, learn more about what's going on across the rest of the globe. It's been a great warm welcome.
Hasn't there? Yeah, like you can really feel that Indiana's so proud to host it. And yeah, that I think that permeates through everything that we've seen from the guest speakers. They've had the governor here, they've had the president of Indiana University, they've had the Secretary of State for Commerce. So they've really, they've rolled out the carpet and I think made a really good welcome.
Yeah, I think that commitment from senior level people, but also hearing some of the stories of how much work has gone into delivering the conference here. But the conference is only here because of years of hard work to support entrepreneurship across the state. I think the president of Indiana University, she talked about building relationships across the state. And she took the time to visit every single county. There's 90 counties in the state, so that's 90 meetings with civic leaders.
Wow.
That the president of the university has taken the time to do that, and that shows us a level of commitment to entrepreneurship and ecosystem building.
It shows intention, right? It shows that they're, as you say, for someone in a senior year like that to commit to doing something like that and do that's intentional. And that we were talking, I was having some conversation with a few others too, and that's sort of something that came through. There's like a shared mission, there's an acceleration, but the acceleration is towards this Indiana the Bold, which I think when you have that personality or the thing that people are striving for, it's easier for people to sort of come in behind that and say, we are Indiana the Bold, or we are Denver that never settles, or we are, that really, I think, helps having that shared mission. So you're obviously here, and you're here with representing EUK and the membership universities from that. How's it been from that side of things, I guess, from like university education? Have you had a few sessions on that?
So, yeah, I've been looking out for the sessions with universities, but also the ones which are more generally around ecosystem building. I think what's stood out for me is the value of entrepreneurship within universities. It feels a bit more integrated here in the States. Haven't really seen much about how it works elsewhere in the globe. So, but I've got a lot more to compare now from the UK approaches to the US approaches, and entrepreneurship seems so much more integrated into university life and into ecosystems.
Yeah.
And this conference is all about ecosystems. It's all about building ecosystems. But the role of the universities just seems to be a natural fit rather than something that's an afterthought or shoehorned in at the last minute.
Yeah, I think the universities, the examples we've even seen of the famous Indiana entrepreneurs, they're very closely linked to either spin-outs universities, or universities played a role in their success. It was interesting. Did you catch the Brad Feld sessions the other day about it? So he was really interesting, and he's obviously written the book, The Startup Community and the Startup Community Way. And he makes a really interesting distinction. I've already previously mentioned this around the difference between a startup community and an entrepreneurial ecosystem, and how when he first wrote the book, he had said there's entrepreneurs and there's feeders, and the feeders, the universities, the councils were being described as feeders, and how that didn't go down too well. And I think he then wrote the second book and corrected that, and he says there's actually a third. So there's founders, there's feeders, and there's instigators. And he would very much see that there's people within those feeder organizations that are instigating things within the startup community. And I thought it was a really nice way to sort of tie it all together.
There was another keynote speaker who used the analogy, because we're in Indiana, home of the Indy 500. It's all about motorsport. I had a great trip out to the Speedway on Sunday, which was brilliant. But he talked about the pit crew.
Yes.
So you've got the founder, who is the driver. You've got the startup or the business, which is the car. And then you've got the support crew, the pit crew. And you can't win a race without a really, really good pit crew, without those engineers, without those technicians. And that's the role of the ESOs, the entrepreneurship support organizations, and the universities, to provide that pit crew. And that's a really good way of thinking about it, I think.
Totally. There's another analogy. So there's a lot of them floating around baking a cake, and getting the right ingredients, but having the right the temperature in the oven. And it went on for a while. It was probably in a 15-minute analogy because it worked quite well. There's so many different points, but yeah, I think that idea is that it's not a solo thing. Definitely there's a collaboration element, and I think that shared vision, as you mentioned, helps
Yeah.
to get people coalescing around that. I guess entrepreneurship here as well, I've always seen it as just a more natural embedded into everything. And I'll make the point that I don't know if this is true, but it's my personal thought is that the way that the tax system works in the US, when they do their own taxes, so there's not a big switch from doing your own taxes as an employee to doing your own taxes as a business owner. Whereas in the UK, there's a big switch, and often it's a barrier to some people to have to fill out or think about filling out that self-assessment for the first time because they're so used to potentially having an employer that does that. And to me, I think that's a barrier, a small barrier maybe, but in the US, it's not there. So that switch between employment and self-employment, I think, is a little bit easier. It's greased a little bit. That it's not as seen as as big a event.
Yeah, that it's not something that had ever come across something I'd thought about or seen as a
Mm.
barrier, but I think that there is a different atmosphere around entrepreneurship and how it's perceived in the US to the UK. Something to work on, and I guess one of the ways that we need to work on that is through education. So, and what's our role as enterprise educators to change those attitudes towards entrepreneurship? And I think what's struck me here, I talked about education being or universities being integrated, which they absolutely are, but there is still a focus of entrepreneurship being quite discrete within the university. And what we've got a strength that we're building through the EUK network is integrating entrepreneurship education, that experiential learning into other subject areas, into biomedical science or into chemistry, so that all our students are developing those entrepreneurial mindsets.
And sorry.
I think what's been reinforced through this conference for me is the sessions that are around education is the importance of those experiential learning
Mm.
techniques. That's the way entrepreneurship education is done.
Yeah.
It's the way it's being done worldwide. It works. It develops mindset, competencies whilst educating, and this is about shifting our educational approaches. With the developments of AI, it's been another strong theme of the conference. The approaches that we take in enterprise education use AI as a tool, and the approaches that we take don't allow AI as that knowledge base. The assessment we use can't just be shortcutted by using AI. So we've already solved some of those challenges.
Hmm.
So that's another theme that's come through.
Yeah, absolutely. Couple of things on that. Just you mentioned the experiential learning. So obviously you've got the ETC toolkit, which entrepreneurship in the curriculum toolkit by UK. I used that in my role when I was an entrepreneurship educator. And that's a really rich resource as to how defined experiential activities to do in the non-traditional entrepreneurship courses. Some really cool ones in there as well, good examples.
Yeah, and I think experiential learning doesn't have to be the experience of setting up a complete business and running it. It's taking all those different elements of a business, whether that's ideation, whether that's negotiation, and breaking those discrete areas into something which is experiential. So when the student is undertaking that experience, not only are they developing the specific skill and the technical knowledge that that experience gives them, but they're also developing a mindset that says, I can go and do this. I can practically apply these skills in a real life situation.
And that's going to be so important. Like when we see the displacement of jobs and stuff in the coming years, the ability to have that mindset and desire, I guess, and understand how to where to start is really, really important. We've got a few seconds left. I was just curious to see for those who, is there any one speaker, one idea, one conversation that has really stood out for you in your time here in Indiana that you'd think would be useful to share with those watching?
So hard to narrow it down to one. I'm going to talk about two
Okay.
because I've talked about the first I had three, but I'll talk about the first extensively right now. So I'll give you two, but I'll give you them really quickly. First was around youth entrepreneurship, especially K through 12 or primary and secondary school, and maybe further education in a UK context. There is so much happening across the globe where there is a demonstrable,
Demonstrable.
demonstrable,
Yeah, we'll take it.
I
I'll be one of them. It's fine.
demonstrable uh, uh, impact of entrepreneurial education, not only in outcomes, but also in engagement. Reaching kids who don't want to engage with traditional education, getting them into the classroom, doing something that's useful, developing their skills and competencies in a way it takes education to where they are. There were examples from Puerto Rico, examples from Indiana State. From this is a bit of a passion project for me. It's not necessarily related with Enterprise Educators UK, because we mainly work in higher education. But the UK needs to wake up. We've got some shifts in the curriculum in Wales. The new curriculum in Wales allows space for entrepreneurial education. We need to change the curriculum in UK education to allow entrepreneurial education to become part of the curriculum. It will engage young people, and it will give them the tools and the skills and the mindset that they need for the 21st century. So that was the first one. The second one was a comment from a fellow UK delegate, Peter, yesterday during his panel session, and it was around sustainability and regenerative entrepreneurship and how invisible it is at this conference, which is a real shame. We still face massive challenges around global impact, entrepreneurship for accessibility. I think it's a theme that I've had lots of conversations about the motive, why people are motivated to support entrepreneurs. And it's all about leveling up. It's all about helping people be the best that they can be in developing their own autonomy and agency and being able to make their own decisions. But we haven't, that's not been a theme that's been a theme that I've had conversations about, but it's not been a theme that's come across in the in the keynotes or in the parallel session.
Very interesting point. Very interesting point. And I guess the challenge is there that they make a point of staying out of geopolitics and geopolitical things, and I guess could urge or could edge into it a wee bit potentially, depending on the conversation. But I completely take it, and it's a really interesting bit of feedback. I'm sure that the GEC will love to hear.
Yeah, I think it's just something that needs to be highlighted more on stage.
Yeah.
Putting geopolitics to one side and the opinions of certain leaders. As an entrepreneurial community, we know that we have to shift to regenerative business models, to sustainable business models. We can't just keep exploiting. So that needs to become a wider part of the conversation.
Great. I think that's a really good place to stop. And thanks for coming and having a chat, and enjoy the last couple of hours of GEC.
Thank you so much, Chris. Been great to spend time with you, and great to spend time here in the wonderful city of Indianapolis.
It has been great.